What's up, you guys, and welcome to the first edition of the Talkin Mets with Tony podcast, my new weekly podcast where I'll be covering the latest Mets and Major League Baseball news from the week. I'll recap the previous week of games for the Mets, talk about the most recent news around the team and the league, give weekly predictions for the Mets' upcoming schedule, and most importantly, getting you guys involved, taking your phone calls, sharing your tweets about the team, and so much more. Before I go any further, be sure to subscribe to the channel and drop this video a like. You guys can also follow me on social media at Tony Metro MLB. The links are in the description. So in this week's episode, we got a lot of stuff to cover. Let's take a look at the docket. First up, Francisco Lindor contract extension talks. Will the Mets and Lindor reach a deal before opening day? We're going to be previewing the Mets 2021 season and what we can expect from the team. We're going to take one or two of your calls, and then I'm going to give you my weekly predictions for the Mets from April 1st through April 7th. So let's get started. Francisco Lindor extension talks. So just 24 hours before opening day, and Lindor remains unextended by the Mets. Now, we know that Lindor said at his introductory press meeting that he would not negotiate a contract extension during the season. That makes opening day the deadline for a deal. Sunday comes around. Steve Cohen and Francisco Lindor have dinner together. Mets fans are feeling very positive about a potential extension. Then Monday comes out, and there's multiple sources that say the Mets' most recent offer to Francisco Lindor was for 10 years and $325 million. Now, that was reported as the team's best and final offer. But on the same day, reports come out that Lindor's camp is looking for a 12-year, $385 million deal. Now, what followed were some very interesting tweets from Mets owner Steve Cohen, including this one saying Lindor is a heck of a player and a great guy. I hope he signs. A few hours later, Andy Martino of SMY reports the Mets and Lindor's camp are brainstorming ideas to find a middle ground. And Cohen replied to that tweet saying, I don't see a lot of brainstorming going on over here. Now, that really riled up Mets fans and Mets Twitter. The two sides are playing hardball, just like the Mets did with Trevor Bauer, JT Realmuto, and George Springer. They're willing to make a bid on these big players, but there's a line in the sand, and they're not going to overpay to get their guy. Now, in the case of Francisco Lindor, it's a little bit different. Number one, he's the youngest of that group. He's 27 years old and should be a superstar player for the majority of whatever long-term contract that he signs. The other part, the Mets have a little more skin in the game with Lindor. They, of course, traded Andres Gimenez, Ahmed Rosario, and prospects Isaiah Green and Josh Wolf to the Indians to acquire Lindor. So the Mets have a lot more to lose, at least in terms of their view in the public eye, if they're unable to extend Lindor before opening day. If Lindor and the Mets can't reach a contract extension before opening day and he goes to free agency, it would be a complete failure by this front office. And clearly they didn't gauge Lindor's asking price properly before they traded for him with the Indians. Now, that all being said, I believe the Mets' offer to Lindor is very fair. 10 years and $325 million would be the fifth most valuable contract in all of baseball. It would take Lindor through his age 37 season. He gets a lifetime contract. He'll never have to go out and test free agency. Plus, the Mets are probably going to be biting the bullet on the last 2 or 3 years of that contract as he enters the twilight of his career. Now, Lindor wants a contract that will pay him through his age 39 season. But that's kind of the norm for these superstar mega deals right now. Looking around the league, similar contracts, the Phillies gave Bryce Harper a 13-year deal, taking him from age 26 through his age 39 season. The Angels did the same with Mike Trout. 12-year deal, age 27 through his age 40 season. My message to Mets fans, don't panic. I know it's getting down to the wire, but it's not over yet. The Mets are not mutually exclusive in having a deadline like this reach the last days. Just last year, the Dodgers traded for Mookie Betts on February 10th, and though it was part of the pandemic shutdown, he didn't sign an extension with the team until one day before opening day on July 22nd. I think this $385 million asking price from Lindor is a bargaining tactic just to drive the Mets price up just a little bit. And in the end, I do think the Mets and Lindor will reach an extension before opening day for 10 years and $350 million. Okay, so that's out of the way. Let's move on, talk about the 2021 Mets. So odds makers seem to love the Mets. They're the favorite almost unanimously across the board to win the NL East. PECOTA has the Mets winning the East with 91 wins. Fangraphs has the Mets with an expected win total of 93, and again, the most in the NL East. Unfortunately, I gotta throw a little bit of cold water on this. I think this Mets team is good. I think they're gonna win 90 games and make the playoffs. But I do not think that we are better than the Atlanta Braves right now. The Nationals, you could throw them away in my opinion. They're an older, slower team that's going to strike out a ton, going to have to deal with the injuries from Steven Strasburg and Max Scherzer last year, and have a lot go right for them to compete for the NL East. The Phillies, well, they're the Phillies, and I don't think they're in the same field as the Mets or the Braves. Meanwhile, the Braves have ran away with the NL East for the third straight year in 2020. They play insane defense, they hit situationally and for power, and usually have a solid bullpen. Their rotation doesn't exactly dazzle, but it has enough firepower in there, especially with the additions of veterans Charlie Morton and Drew Smyly and the up-and-coming pitchers in Ian Anderson and Kyle Wright. The biggest problem for this Mets team, aside from their team defense and bullpen, is their head-to-head play versus the Braves. The Mets have not played the Braves well over the last few years. In 2018, the Mets went 6-13 versus the Braves. In 2019, the Mets went 8-11 versus the Braves. And in 2020, the Mets went 3-7 versus Atlanta. So the biggest key for the Mets to win the division this year is to improve their head-to-head record versus the Atlanta Braves. We've seen the Mets lose to the Braves in every possible way over the last few years, whether it was Julio Teheran shutting the Mets out, the bullpen imploding against Freddie Freeman or Ronald Acuna, or a perfect outfield assist from Nick Markakis to throw out a runner at the plate. And to me, I don't see that changing quite yet. The Braves continue to have a team of athletes that play the field well, run the bases, and can kill you by 1,000 paper cuts or just hit bombs all day. The Mets bullpen is a huge concern to me, and personally, I'm already getting worked up just thinking about Yuris Familia or Dellin Betances coming into a tie game in the 8th inning down in Atlanta. I think this division goes down to the wire. I think the Mets are going to improve enough in their head-to-head action against the Braves, and I think they're going to make some big acquisitions throughout the season to improve the team. But at this moment, I'm going to say the Mets will win 90 games and finish in second, and the Braves will win 95 games and take home the NL East title. Mets, I hope you prove me wrong. I really do. So let's get to your guys' questions. As I posted on my Twitter and on my Instagram account, you guys can call into the podcast, leave me a voicemail with your question or thoughts on the Mets or anything Major League Baseball related, and I'll take them on the show. You guys sent in a lot of good ones today, but I only have time for one, so let's lead it off with Elias from Rochester. Elias, go ahead.
What's up, Tony? This is Elias from Rochester. My question for you is, are there any, top prospects in the Mets system that might be able to come up in September? I know it's a bit in the future, but just wondering.
Thanks, Elias, LFGM. So taking a look at the top 5 prospects for the Mets, they have Francisco Alvarez, Ronnie Mauricio, Matthew Allen, Pete Crow Armstrong, and Brett Beatty. Now, that's a really strong top 5. The unfortunate part is that they're very young. Pete Crow Armstrong, Brett Beatty, Ronnie Mauricio, they're all under 21 years old. Same for Francisco Alvarez and Matthew Allen. We did get to see those guys play in the spring, and they look pretty good. Brett Beatty showed a really nice approach at the plate this spring. The same could be said for Ronnie Mauricio. The unfortunate part is, last year, of course, losing out on the minor league season, these guys only got reps at the alternate site in Brooklyn, so they missed an opportunity to keep growing last year. So I don't really see any of those guys getting called up this year. I think of any top prospects the Mets have, the most likely ones are starting pitcher Thomas Szapucki or third baseman Mark Vientos. Szapucki, a former 5th rounder, has some really good minor league numbers. The problem for him has been able to stay healthy. A few years ago, he had Tommy John surgery. When he returned from that in 2019, he had some back issues that held him out. That being said, I could see Szapucki being called up at some point this season as a lefty out of the pen or as a spot starter. As far as the rotation, there's probably still 2 or 3 guys ahead of him to make a start, including Jordan Yamamoto and maybe even Stephen Tarpley, but wouldn't be surprised to see Szapucki be brought up at some point in 21. As for Mark Vientos, has been in the Mets system for a number of years. He's 21 years old. His highest level of play is at A-ball, where he played in 2019, but he struggled there. He hit just for a 300 OBP in 111 games. Doesn't rank out as a tremendous defensive third baseman, but should do enough to stay there. One other name to keep an eye on is outfielder Khalil Lee, who was acquired from the Royals in the 3-team trade with the Red Sox that sent Andrew Benintendi to Kansas City. He had a lot of hype when he was first drafted as a power hitter with tremendous speed, but hasn't put it all together. The last few years, he struggled with strikeouts. That's kept his OBP really low. He's looking like he's going to profile more as a corner outfielder, and he didn't exactly have the best spring training performance this year for the Mets. We know the five-man taxi squad for the Mets, and one of the members of that is outfielder Malik Smith. He'll probably be the first outfielder to get a call should the team need one. Otherwise, wouldn't be surprised to see Khalil Lee at some point during the season. Elias, thanks for the question. That's a great one. We're going to move on real quick, and I'm going to go to my predictions for the week. So, Thursday, opening night, Max Scherzer versus Jacob deGrom. Like I mentioned, I have the Mets pegged for 90 wins this year, so let's get started. We all know the opening day success that this franchise has had, so got to give the Mets the W on opening day. The Mets will play 2 more games in DC with Marcus Stroman and Tajon Walker on the mound. I think they take one more and drop the other. After that, the team will head to Philadelphia for 3 with the Phillies. The Mets are going to skip 5th starter Joey Lucchesi in the rotation, so we'll get to see 2 starts from deGrom and 2 from Stroman over the first week. I'm going to say the Mets take 2 of 3 from the Phillies and will start their season 4-2. So, there you guys have it. That's the first edition of the Talkin Mets with Tony podcast. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Stay tuned for next week's episode, Wednesday, April 7th. Until then, I have been your host, Tony Metro. Let's go Mets.